Hello everyone, I am Neal Saxena and today I am going to discuss about the conflicts in Middle East. Middle East is a geopolitical term that commonly refers to the region spanning the Levant, Arabian Peninsula, Anatolia including modern-day Turkey and Cyprus, Egypt, Iran and Iraq. Here is a map for the same. Middle East has been one of the most unstable regions in the world, which has seen a lot of geopolitical conflicts and rising terrorism. A few examples of these conflicts would be the Syrian Civil War, the Iran-Iraq War, the Israel-Palestine conflict, the Gulf War, the Yemeni Civil War, the Iraqi Civil War, the Persian Gulf Crisis, and many more conflicts. But why is it so that there are so many conflicts in the Middle East? Let us take a look at the causes of all these conflicts. Religious tensions between different religious groups, fall of the Ottoman Empire in the 20th century, and the subsequent mistakes made by the French and the British. Then we have the influence of the US-Russia Cold War on the Middle East, the Iran-Saudi Arabia power rivalry, and the growth of Arab nationalism in the 20th century, and growth of Islamic extremist terror outfits. Religious tensions. Middle East is the birthplace and spiritual center of religions such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and many more. It is also known as the cradle of civilization. Tensions between different religious and ethnic communities and religious extremism play a major role in the Middle East. For example, tension between the Jews and the Muslims is a major cause of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The fall of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire that ruled major parts of the Middle East lost in World War I. The territory ruled by Ottoman Empire was transferred to the Allied powers and was partitioned as per the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This agreement basically divided the territory between the French and the British, which exploited the region till the 1940s. The straight lines drawn on map were profitable for the British and French, but not for the people. Mistakes made by the French and British. The borders drawn by the British and the French in the Middle East were intentionally drawn in such a way that the different religious groups remained in the same country together. This was done so that the people remained divided and not unite to fight against the colonial rulers. For example, the Syrian country borders wedged rival Sunnis and Shias together, which is one of the causes of the Syrian Civil War. Influence of the US-Russia Cold War. Middle East is an important area due to its oil reserves. Both US and Russia have invested heavily in modernizing various armed forces in the Middle East and in countering each other's influence in the area. For example, US has supported Israel and Turkey in modernizing their armies. Both Russia and US have at different times supported different factions of the Syrian Civil War to counter the other. Apart from this rivalry, we have also the Iran-Saudi Arabia rivalry. Iran and Saudi Arabia are two big powers in the Middle East, which have been engaged in a Middle Eastern Cold War since 1970s. While Iran is mostly Shia, Saudi Arabia is mostly Sunni. Both have been involved in proxy wars in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, etc. They have been even supporting proxy militias in some areas. The growth of Arab nationalism and Islamic extremist groups. The Arab nationalism, which grew in the 20th century, is a nationalist ideology that aims for the unity of Arab world and to fight against Western influence. This is a major reason of the Israel-Palestine issue. This also conflicts with the Iranian view of Middle East, as Arab nationalism is centered around Sunni Muslims and Arabs. Apart from this, recent decades have seen growth of several Islamic terrorist outfits like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas, and many more, which have been targeting innocent civilians not only in Middle East but around the world. To understand all these aspects of the conflicts in Middle East, let us take a look at the Syrian Civil War, a case study. This is an image of Syria before the war, and this is after the war. Initial beginning of the conflict, 2011. The Arab Spring movement in 2011 spread to Syria, which resulted in people protesting against the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. As the protests prolonged and became violent, Assad-led government shot the first shots of this war. This turned the movement from democratic protests into a bitter civil war. Many protesters formed rebel militias which further got supported by international Islamic extremist groups. Some soldiers defect from the Syrian army to support the rebels and form this Free Syrian Army. In 2012, Al-Qaeda forms a new branch in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra, to fight against the Syrian government. Same year, Syrian Kurdish groups declare their autonomy and informally separate from Syria. This marks the beginning of a multi-sided proxy war in Syria, supported by different countries. Beginning of the proxy war. By the end of 2012, Iran, al-Assad's ally, starts supporting Assad by sending daily cargo flights and providing military support. At the same time, Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations start sending money and weapons to the rebels through Jordan and Turkey to counter Iran's influence. In turn, Iran backs Lebanese militia group Hezbollah to invade Syria and fight alongside Assad. Now comes the US intervention. Horrified by the use of chemical weapons by Assad, US intervenes and secretly provides military training to the rebels and also launches military airstrikes on Syria. This soon becomes a scene of great power rivalry between US and Russia, with US supporting the rebels and Russia backing al-Assad. In 2014, something changes the war: the formation of ISIS. In 2014, an Al-Qaeda affiliate based in Syria and Iraq breaks off from the rebels to form ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. It starts fighting other rebels and invades Iraq. In some months, it gains control over some areas in Iraq and Syria. The US now shifts its focus from fighting against Assad to fighting against ISIS, which poses a bigger threat to the US national security interests than Assad. The US starts bombing the ISIS, but the priority for the other Middle Eastern countries and US allies like Turkey was fighting against Assad and not the ISIS, and hence they kept supporting the rebels against Syria. Meanwhile, in 2015, Russia intervenes to informally support al-Assad and starts bombing the Syrian rebels. In 2016, Assad overtakes the capital city of Aleppo. In 2017 and 18, the US and the allies effectively wipe out ISIS from Iraq and Syria. This multi-sided conflict has still not been solved. Different countries have supported different factions at different times, forming confusing and unclear alliances. As the situation now stands today, no one on ground even knows who is fighting whom and why. One thing that is clear is that a country which was once full of people living peaceful lives is now a war-torn country full of debris. Here is a list of the sources used for this presentation. You may pause the video to look at the sources. Thank you for watching.